Your defense is an offense. I'm going to say that again. Your defense is an offense. Now, that's a pretty cryptic statement. What does that mean? What I mean by that is that when you're dealing with either a spiritually abusive environment or a spiritually abusive person, when you do anything to defend yourself, that is viewed as offensive. And it's really important that you remember that because many times when people are in these situations with spiritually abusive people, enablers of spiritually abusive people, or just people who um, use a lot of manipulation to abuse others psychologically, when you're on the receiving end of that, it's really easy to forget how those types of people operate and do things that continue to play into their hands. And so when I talk about your defense being offensive or an offense, think about a situation recently in the past where you had to deal with somebody who was a manipulative or an abusive person. And just, take a second to think about that. So when you think about that and you talk about, or you're telling the person whatever it is they did, or you're attempting to defend yourself from that person's toxic behavior, 9 times out of 10, I bet you that they turned that around and made it seem like what you were doing was a hurtful or abusive thing. So I'll give you an example. In a lot of these spiritually abusive environments, when people bring up the fact that they are either being harmed or they have concerns about harm, they're often made to feel like they're the bad person. Um, let's say that you are in a situation in a spiritually abusive environment and you bring up something where you were caused some sort of harm. Maybe somebody said something to you that was inappropriate or they violated a boundary and you bring it up. In a healthy environment, that's dealt with. But in an environment where spiritual abuse goes on, that act of you defending yourself is looked at as bad. And so you might be labeled as judgmental. You might be labeled as a critical person. You might be labeled as somebody who's always fault finding or even exaggerating, bitter, you don't forgive, all these other things. And so a lot of you have talked about that in the comment section or just, in other lives and other interactions we've had about how when you bring these things up, when you are attempting to protect and defend yourself, you are now looked at as the offender. We've talked about this as well on this channel, but there's a concept named Darvo. And I won't go into that in this video, but I would like for you to look that up. And basically, the first part, the D stands for, I think, denial, then A, anger, then RVO is reversing victim and offender. And a lot of manipulative people do this. And so basically, when somebody is, called out on their behavior, they do everything they can to deflect from the flashlight on them, on their character issues, and make it about the other person. And so, a lot of times people have talked about the feeling of helplessness that they have in spiritually abusive environments. And that is completely normal because this is what is happening. You're attempting to defend yourself, and then you are criticized, and not only criticized for it, but you are labeled as a bad person or some sort of offender. It's almost like somebody tries to punch you, right? And so you hold up something to defend yourself. Maybe you hold up like I don't know, you hold up something anyway, some kind of weapon, maybe a shield or something. And so they hit their knuckles on the shield, their knuckles are bleeding, and then they say, you hurt me, right? And you're just defending yourself. So that is what happens in these types of environments. And the reason this happens, it is a method of control. Think about it, if you are somebody who is going to defend yourself and who's going to advocate for yourself, that is going to upset the balance of an abusive environment or an abusive dynamic where one person holds the power. And something else that's important to remember about people who are psychologically abusive, particularly within the realm of spiritual abuse, it's important to remember that whatever they can do to get you to inflict that harm and damage on yourself, they're going to do. It's almost like they don't want to get their hands dirty. And so, in a situation like that, when you are attempting to defend yourself and you do so and you're labeled as a bad person, then that's going to have consequences for you. You're not going to want to speak up in the future. You will do different things to even rationalize or justify the harm that you are experiencing. And so that person or that system really doesn't have to do very much. Something to learn about, something to recognize about these spiritually abusive systems and people is that whatever they can do to make you turn on yourself, they're going to do that. That's easier for them and also makes their behavior much harder to detect. And so it's really important that you remember that. Sometimes people have these unrealistic expectations about these types of people and these types of environments. They're expecting them to react how they would. So let's say that, you're a pretty self-aware, emotionally healthy person, and someone brings up something that you did that they didn't like. You'd have a discussion about it. You'd try to work it out. Maybe you reconcile, maybe you don't, but the point is you hear the person out for the most part. But in these types of, so you might go into that situation expecting that same type of treatment. And that's a big mistake. You don't want to do that if you are in an environment that you suspect of being spiritually abusive, right? Because if you go in there and you expect to be listened to and heard and dealt with in an equitable manner, you're going to be very disappointed and probably harmed as a result. So I'm not telling you this so that you don't do anything, but rather that you manage your expectations. So if you go into a situation and you are bringing up something that is wrong, some way that you've been harmed, you need to expect for that to be turned on you. And you could be told all different kinds of things. You're critical. You never have anything positive to say, all these other things. The person or system on the receiving end of that is going to act very victimized. And so if you're aware of that, then you will strategize and plan accordingly. You have to make sure that your expectations are realistic, and you have to also expect that you are going to be attacked. And one important thing to do in that situation is do not attempt to defend yourself or justify your actions. And when I say defend yourself, I don't mean you should just allow yourself to be harmed, but don't get into this power play in which you are now trying to prove that you're not a bad person, because that's playing into their hands. And so if you're accused of being all sorts of things or the person acts hurt, expect that. That is what happens with people who are manipulative, psychologically and spiritually abusive. Not only people, but systems. They do this because they are doing whatever they can to deflect and avoid accountability and address the real problem. And so, the next time you're in a situation, remember that and don't take it personally, because that would pretty much happen to anybody. So I would like to hear from you all in the comments. Have you experienced your self-defense as being an offense to somebody else? And if so, how did you handle that? What are some of the tips and advice that you have for other people? So I'd love to hear from you in the comments. My website is skillsetcounseling.com. You can go there to book a free consultation, and also there's information in the description box. So I hope you have a wonderful day that's filled with peace. Bye-bye.